Nwabisa, it's so good to be swapping seats today, where I'll be asking you your insight, your knowledge. And what I love mostly about it is that you are the perfect person to be talking about this because you're the strategic partnerships director at the Branson Center, which is phenomenal. But more than that, as the entrepreneur for other entrepreneurs, it's so important that we're having this discussion. So welcome.
Thank you. And it is feeling a little bit strange for me to be on this side of the conversation. And so I'm happy that you're the person who gets to interview me.
Exciting. I think for our listeners, I wanted to start with just this idea of partnerships. How do we even start to explain what good partnerships are in a business space, in an entrepreneurial space?
Sure. I think so. I'm a big word nerd. So I think when we start thinking about partnerships, let's go back to the basics of what the word is, which is to partner. And so that already means that there is more than one side to the conversation. There's more than one player in the relationship. And then when we start thinking about what good partnership feels like, it's when there is good exchange, there is a clear exchange. And so in order to get to that place of good and clear exchange, it actually means that we have shared objectives and we have alignment in terms of our values, and we kind of are striving towards the same things. And we also exist to make each other look good. Even if it's not about my benefit, but because we're now partners, I exist to amplify and make you look good. And so the question is, what is a good partnership in a business? For me, it's exactly what a good partnership is in any version of a partnership.
I'm so glad you're covering any version of a partnership. I think we tend to forget that business is a form of partnership in itself.
Yeah.
But when we're crafting our business objectives and we're crafting, what we're going to do in the next 2, 3 years, 5 years, what we're launching next, I find that partnership is something we leave behind. It's not something we bring forward as a strategic player in our plans. And then when we're crafting our brands and our purpose, how do we fuse purpose and brand into partnerships?
When I think about partnerships in a visual way, I imagine a river. So your business is traversing this sort of stream, and you've got the rocks, you've got the riverbed, you've got the banks, and so your business is trying to navigate its way through this. The partnerships are actually the water. It's what actually flows in and around and within your business. It's what nourishes your business. It's what feeds it. It's what gives it life, really. And so I think what has been interesting is that as we're building businesses, not only do we leave partnerships behind, we don't even think about them at all. And yet I think they're so important because it's the partnerships that then enable, one, the articulation of our purpose. It's the partnerships that then enable the impact that our purpose intends to achieve in the world. It's the partnerships that then bring the resources that we need into our business. And it's the partnerships that then amplify what our business is about beyond selling a product or a service. So when you start thinking about the different role players in your business, so it's everyone from your customer through to the people in your business, through to the champions and the people who advocate for your business, through to your suppliers, your investors, all of those people, when you start thinking about them as partners and how you can actually engage them in ways where you're actually trying to amplify each other's objectives and you're driving towards the same purpose, that starts actually giving your business a whole new way and a whole new sort of trajectory when we start thinking about growth. This is now leveling up. And so I think partnerships become actually a really incredible business tool that is aimed at growing your business and maybe on some level bringing the human element into your business. Mm-hmm. And for me, it brings in a lot of fun.
The river analogy speaks to that energy,
Yeah.
that groundswell, that growth. And I like that you added fun at the end because I'm not sure that we're using that to our advantage more because there's extra humans now you're collaborating with.
Yeah. So I think for me, fun, well, one, this is just a personal sort of how I view the world, which is fun is an incredibly legitimate tactic towards achieving whatever it is that you aim to achieve. And so that's just one little thing about me. And at the same time, for me, partnerships, because it's so human-centered, there is an element of the partnerships discussion that can't quite come through in the form of a formula. It can't quite come through in the form of a strategy that you've created all by yourself. In order to arrive at partnership, you have to include the other so that it actually is something that is workable, and it is something that perhaps becomes a lifetime sort of journey that continues to evolve. It also means you're trying to build into the arrangement of a partnership almost this fail-safe measure, which is because we're working on this one thing together or number of things together because we're trying to achieve a purpose or we're trying to amplify each other's purpose or objectives, it's very unlikely that something will go wrong because we are in constant communication and constant exchange. So then eliminates also then the stress, the anxiety of either having to deliver, to perform, but rather brings in this idea of, well, I'm having a bit of a challenge in this particular part of this arrangement. Let me then go and have an exchange with my partner and let's see if we can solve it together, or maybe I'll gain another perspective where what I perceive to be a challenge isn't a challenge. And so there's something joyous about the partnerships discussion. And so that's when the element of fun comes through, and that's the element of almost that human-centered design and that approach in terms of now what partnerships can do for your business. And I'm happy to give, more concrete examples, but I think for me, it's even the ethos of what partnerships are. And if anybody in their business is looking for somebody to employ as somebody to look after their partnerships, I think there is also an incredible distinction to be made between what we see then as maybe communications, what we see as business development, what we see as sales. Somebody who's coming in for the role of partnerships may actually be none of those things, but needs all of that support from those functions in the business as well.
You make it sound so practical and so easy to understand. And, the way you unpack the word partner has just brought new meaning for me, where I'm like, it's something we should know every day. How do you then, or when is rather a good time to introduce your purpose to your partner? The partnerships can be very commercial and have maybe in the beginning a distant relationship. How do you bring in your new partner? At what time do you express your purpose? And, how do you introduce it, that this is what you're after? Because there may be shared values already that are unsaid. What's the best way to go into this relationship?
As loudly, as honestly, and as straight up as it can be, in the least complicated way, which is at the beginning, as you start the conversation. Because once you introduce your purpose into the conversation, generally, because we're having a conversation, the other party will probably then bring in their purpose into the conversation. And already that's the starting point of working out if there is alignment, if there is shared value. And because we do kind of walk into a space of partnership from a place of understanding that it's always about the right people at the right time, doing the right things. If there is not alignment, we do not need to force the conversation. We can then walk away without it being because of crisis or because we got into a place of conflict, but it's a place of saying, well, we can see, I now understand what you're about. You understand what I'm about. Thank you for this conversation. Go well. Let's stay close. And you move on. So you bring it in from the beginning, loudly, boldly, and really as honestly and as simply as you can.
I think any partner would appreciate that kind of transparency, and that brings new energy into the discussion, which
it's
is
also
fantastic.
fresh, right?
Yes.
And I think there's a sense of approaching it from this very, very clear human perspective is we don't need to bring in the big fancy language. And so I think there is something quite funny about my title being Strategic Partnerships Director, because that's quite a mouthful and makes me sound like a real grown-up. And yet, as a half grown-up, I approach my partnerships from such a simplistic point of view. And so I have two ways in which I engage with partners, especially if we can meet in person. The first is a potential partner always gets a walk with me. There's something fundamentally important about being on the same sort of footpath with somebody, facing the same direction,
Walking together.
walking together, going towards the same destination. And that's when you start talking about purpose, and you're exploring and you're discovering. And so it starts there. It's not about the 12-page PowerPoint deck. If maybe we can't meet for a walk, and maybe it's about meeting in a more social time, it's about a glass of wine or a cup of coffee. And again, it's not about, I've got something to sell to you. I want to find out what moves you, what excites you, what frustrates you, what keeps you up at night. And suddenly when I understand that and I'm able to then share the same with you, we're starting to then talk about purpose, and we're starting to talk about, can we be partners here as individuals, and then, of course, as the organizations that we represent. And so it also then immediately, here's the thing, it's a hack. It actually starts then shortening the amount of time that you have between what would be your first conversation with a potential partner and actually closing, I guess, the deal with a partner, because we come from a place of understanding. The other things, the how, that will show itself. But if we're clear that we want to work together and we want to enable something together, that partnership will happen quicker than you think.
You've brought the human side to partnership. You've brought the purpose to the table. You've brought the conversation to the table. And I think my favorite part is how natural it sounds. Now I can think of partnerships in a way that's actionable. I think for the benefit of anyone listening, what are some of the partnerships then people should consider, entrepreneurs especially, should consider if they don't have, or if they have them? What are some of the key partnerships that you should think, I need that type of partner in this area of my business?
Sure. So I think let's go back to what do we think are the three, well, I love the number 3. Anytime I'm thinking about something, like, let's think about it in threes. So before I impose that on, what do we think are the things that entrepreneurs need? And so at the Branson Center, but even in my experience as an entrepreneur, our understanding is that entrepreneurs need access to finance, entrepreneurs need access to market, entrepreneurs need access to network. So can you then look at different entities, whether it's organizations or individuals, and can you start approaching them as partners to fulfill and to fill those buckets in terms of my bucket of network, my bucket of market, my bucket of finance? And then can I categorize and figure out which is the priority? And so that's when we start talking then obviously about your indicators of success in terms of your planning in alignment to your purpose. And so those things all land in terms of when is it the right time to approach which type of partner, and in terms of what to ask for. Because I think often as entrepreneurs, our first thought in terms of thinking about the resources that we need, we think it boils down to finance. Meanwhile, with partners, you can get partners who bring in network, who just do nothing else but maybe introduce you to other partners or shine the light on you so that other people can see what you're doing. Or then maybe all you need is an access to a customer. And so a partner can then say, I can do that for you. I can introduce you to this customer, or I can place you in a platform where you can access other customers. And so I think that's the simplest way, is to look at these 3 things. And if you can find these different players, and in fact, here's an exercise that I do even in my personal capacity. I work out the different categories that I'm trying to fulfill in my own network. Of course, I'm super relational and super network driven. But perhaps there's an exercise you can do as a business, is have these categories of network, finance, and market, and go through then your contact base and take each sort of name that's in your contact base and put it in that bucket and almost map out, and suddenly you'll see where you're lacking. You'll see which bucket needs to be filled up, and that's your priority. That's your do now conversation.
That's so clever.
Yeah.
I like how it actually is resources that's already available.
It's already there.
And just bringing a new lens to it.
Yeah. So you already have, generally most of us who have already started our businesses, and also generally most of us who are human, have been living in the world, actually already have a pretty decent network. We just don't view it as that, or we don't think we have something to bring to the table, or we don't think we can ask for something. And so that also becomes part of a partnership conversation, is understanding what value do you bring And you definitely have value to bring. You just need to say it.
Bringing us back to purpose and partnerships, I actually like that PP. We need the last one, profit. I like profit.
Yes, we like profit.
We like profit.
Yes, because actually part of it, this isn't some feel-good, journey in terms of bringing partners into your business. We're aiming to make sure that all purpose-led businesses are profitable, and that will happen through a partnerships approach.
What happens when we engage in the purpose conversation and maybe you realize, the purpose I expected from my partner is not quite 100% what is aligned to what we do, but there is some, I guess, alignment that we can work with. Do we still go ahead and partner, or do we pull away? Is it as rigid, or is it something that we work with over time and grow?
I mean, we know that the human experience is wobbly, murky. There's very little rigidity in the human experience. And so I think there's something quite strange for me in how I view the world when we continue to try and have these very rigid rules in terms of how we run our businesses and how we grow them. Because at the end of the day, businesses are created, grown, run by human beings. So the same in partnership as well, which is that it's finding where the intersection is, where the meeting point is when we're talking about purpose. And the wonderful thing about purpose is that it becomes this incredible sense check. And so you know exactly then what the boundaries are when you're in that partnership. And so you can then say, maybe as the partnership evolves and there's a bit of scope creep, as we call it sometimes, you can check in and say, but wait a minute, when we then do this thing, does it continue to enable our purpose, or are we perhaps putting resources into a place that doesn't enable our purpose? And it's a yes-no conversation. And suddenly that will tell you whether you stay in that space or you maybe go back and you maybe, ring fence a little bit tighter. But your purpose will continually help you to make the decision around what to do in the partnership. So it's not about 100% alignment, because that would be also strange. The world needs to have this diversity, and we need to almost have our purposes sometimes rub up against each other to challenge, to stress test, and at the same time to bring sense even back into the organization, because there's also no greater feeling, right, when you as the person looking after partnerships look at a specific organization and you say, I think we should have a conversation with them. We should partner with them for the following reasons. And of course, I'm a foghorn, so I'll be like, blah, 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 blah. And I'll really amplify the reason why we need to partner with a certain organization. I'll then engage that organization over, a specific amount of time. And suddenly I come back and I go, guys, that purpose does not align at all. Let's take them off the list. And it's so funny because on some level, you would think that would feel like a failure, or I made a mistake for even having approached them. I love that moment because it's clarity. It's going, right, well, that organization is now off the list. It means I'm getting closer to the ones that I'm supposed to be talking to, or I've now made room for the ones that I don't even know that I'm supposed to be talking to.
Thank you for bringing such practical clarity to the partnership conversation. And I think the role that you play is so important, because you actually are the person who leads some of these things, who has the conversations, who connects. What's the role of gut feel in these moments?
So gut feel is critical. It's so important. And so, when we say purpose is our North Star, I add gut feel is my Southern Cross. It really drives so many of my decisions, even when I'm not sure if I should be in the room or if I should leave the room. If my gut feel comes through, I try as hard as I can to listen to it. And so from a personal point of view, when I experience moments where my gut feel is a bit dull, or I'm not experiencing it as clearly as I could or sometimes can, it's usually an indication of me being very tired. And so because this is such a relational position and it requires for me to give and to also receive and hear from so many people, I know that it's time to take a break so that I can then replenish my cup so that it can be full enough for me to then go out there and partner.
Nwabisa, I'm now going to wrap up our conversation with a few quick fire questions.
I've terrorized so many
You've
other
terrorized
guests with
so
this.
many other guests. I've been one of them. So I get to ask and I'm going to enjoy it.
For my sins.
So, good partnerships are,
Enabling.
purpose-led partnerships are,
Aligned.
those who fear partnerships should,
Follow their purpose.
your purpose is,
My purpose is to connect people to each other and to opportunities.
how perfect a purpose for this moment, for this role, and for everything you've shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. And it's been so much fun sitting on this side of the conversation.
It's been great.